There comes a moment in every strong person's life when silence becomes louder than words, a moment when you realize that explaining yourself is no longer an act of clarity, but an act of self-betrayal. Not everyone who questions you seeks truth. Some seek leverage, some seek control, and some simply cannot survive unless they pull others into confusion. You were not born to stand in emotional courtrooms, defending your intentions to people who have already written their verdict. The more you explain, the more they twist. The calmer you speak, the more they provoke. This is not misunderstanding, it is strategy. And wisdom begins the day you stop participating. Understand this deeply. A person committed to misinterpreting you will never be satisfied, no matter how perfect your explanation is. They feed on reaction. They thrive on justification. Every sentence you offer becomes another thread they pull to unravel your peace. That is why silence unsettles them, because silence denies access. Your integrity does not require permission. Your truth does not require applause. When your actions are consistent, explanations become unnecessary. The need to explain often comes from fear, the fear of being seen as wrong, harsh, or unkind. But strength is not loud, and dignity does not beg to be understood. It stands still while chaos exhausts itself. Some people ask questions not to learn, but to invade. They listen not to understand, but to store your words as weapons. Giving them your reasons is like handing a map to someone determined to sabotage your journey. Emotional distance in such moments is not cruelty, it is self-respect. There is power in choosing where your voice goes. Not every ear deserves your truth. Not every mind is safe for your vulnerability. When you stop explaining yourself, you reclaim energy that was never meant to be wasted. You become calm where others expect chaos. You become grounded where others expect collapse. And here is the quiet truth few will tell you. Walking away is sometimes the most articulate sentence you will ever speak. No drama, no defense, no final statement, just clarity, just peace, just the understanding that shrinking yourself to be understood by those who refuse to see you is the real loss. So stand firm. Speak when it matters. Be silent when it protects you. Let your life explain what your words no longer need to, because the strongest people do not argue with darkness. They step into the light and leave it behind. Silence is not weakness, it is authority. Silence has been misunderstood for far too long. It has been labeled as fear, hesitation, or surrender. But in reality, silence is often the highest form of control a person can exercise. When you stop explaining yourself to those who are committed to misunderstanding you, you are not retreating, you are rising. You are choosing authority over chaos, composure over conflict, and wisdom over wasted energy. There are people who do not listen to understand, but to dissect. They wait for pauses, not to reflect, but to attack. To such minds, explanations are not bridges. They are tools. Every word you offer becomes material for distortion. The more clearly you speak, the more cleverly they twist. In these moments, silence becomes a boundary, firm and unbreakable. It sends a message without noise. You no longer require approval from those who thrive on confusion. True authority does not announce itself. It does not argue its position or plead its case. Authority is calm. It is grounded. It stands still while others exhaust themselves trying to provoke a reaction. When you choose silence, you remove yourself from emotional traps designed to drain you. You refuse to perform in spaces where misunderstanding is intentional, not accidental. Many people feel compelled to explain themselves because they fear being seen as wrong. They fear judgment, rejection, or being misrepresented. But strength begins when you realize that being misunderstood by the wrong people is not a failure, it is freedom. You are not here to be universally understood. You are here to be authentic, consistent, and aligned with your values. Silence protects that alignment. There is a profound difference between communication and justification. Communication builds connection. Justification feeds insecurity. When you constantly explain your choices, boundaries, or emotions, you unknowingly hand others the power to debate your reality. Silence takes that power back. It says, I know who I am, and that is enough. Observe how silence unsettles those who rely on control. They expect reactions. They anticipate emotional responses. When none comes, they grow restless, not because they care, but because they have lost access. Silence denies them the fuel they seek. It starves manipulation and exposes intention without confrontation. This does not mean you become cold or distant to everyone. It means you become selective. You speak where there is respect. You explain where there is sincerity. You remain silent where there is hostility disguised as curiosity. Discernment is not arrogance. It is intelligence refined by experience. Silence also strengthens your inner world. When you stop over-explaining, you stop overthinking. You stop replaying conversations, rewriting sentences in your mind, and carrying unnecessary emotional weight. Your mind becomes clearer, your posture becomes firmer. You begin to move with quiet confidence instead of reactive urgency. History has never favored the loudest voice in the room, but the most composed one. Those who master silence master themselves. They do not chase validation. They do not defend their worth. Their consistency becomes their explanation, their character, their statement. And perhaps the most powerful truth of all is this: silence teaches people how to treat you. When you stop explaining yourself to those who disrespect you, you teach them that access to you is earned, not demanded. You teach them that your peace is not negotiable. You teach them that your energy is sacred. So do not fear silence. Use it. Let it protect you. Let it speak where words would only weaken you. Silence is not absence. It is presence refined. It is authority without aggression. And once you understand this, you will never feel the need to explain yourself to those who never intended to understand you in the first place. Some minds are closed by choice, not confusion. One of the hardest truths to accept in life is that not everyone who challenges you is confused. Some people understand perfectly well what you are saying. They simply refuse to accept it. Their resistance is not intellectual, it is intentional. They are not searching for clarity. They are protecting a narrative that benefits them. When you recognize this, everything changes, because you stop exhausting yourself trying to open doors that were deliberately locked. Many people assume that if they explain something clearly enough, kindly enough, or patiently enough, understanding will eventually arrive. This belief keeps them trapped in endless conversations that go nowhere. You repeat yourself, adjust your tone, soften your words, and still nothing changes. That is because the issue is not your explanation. The issue is that some minds are invested in staying closed. A closed mind is often driven by fear, fear of losing control, fear of being exposed, fear of admitting fault. Understanding would require them to change, and change threatens their sense of power. So they pretend not to understand. They ask the same questions repeatedly, not to learn but to wear you down. They challenge obvious truths, not because they doubt them, but because acknowledging them would dismantle their position. When you engage with such people, you enter a game designed for you to lose. Every explanation becomes an invitation for debate. Every clarification becomes another opportunity for distortion. You begin to feel frustrated, doubting yourself, wondering if you are failing to communicate. In reality, you are being strategically misunderstood. This is why wisdom is not measured by how well you can explain yourself, but by how quickly you can recognize resistance disguised as confusion. There is a noticeable difference between someone who is learning and someone who is deflecting. A learner listens. A deflector interrupts. A learner reflects. A deflector repeats accusations in different forms. Once you see this pattern, you stop offering clarity to those who weaponize it. Understanding this truth saves your emotional energy. Instead of pouring effort into convincing people who are committed to disagreement, you redirect that energy into growth, peace, and purpose. You realize that your responsibility is not to persuade everyone, but to remain aligned with your truth. There is also a deep sense of liberation in accepting that some people will never understand you, not because you are complex, but because understanding you would challenge who they are. And that is not your burden to carry. You are not required to shrink, soften, or dilute yourself to make others comfortable. Closed minds often accuse others of being difficult, stubborn, or unreasonable. This projection keeps them safe from accountability. If they can paint you as the problem, they never have to examine themselves. When you stop explaining yourself to such people, you remove their ability to shift blame. You refuse to participate in illusions. Silence, in this context, becomes clarity. Not for them, but for you. It marks the end of unnecessary struggle. It draws a line between effort and futility. You begin to speak only where growth is possible and remain quiet where conversation is merely performance. It is important to understand that choosing not to engage does not mean you lack compassion. It means you have discernment. Compassion without boundaries becomes self-sacrifice. Discernment allows you to recognize when your words are being wasted and when they are being received. Some minds open through reflection, not explanation. Others never open at all. Your job is not to force the lock, but to know when to walk away. When you stop explaining yourself to those who refuse to understand, you reclaim your dignity. You stop chasing validation. You stand firm in the knowledge that clarity offered to the unwilling is not wisdom, it is self-neglect. So let this truth settle in you. Not all misunderstanding is innocent. Some of it is chosen, and the moment you accept that, you free yourself from the endless cycle of explanation, frustration, and doubt. You step into calm certainty, where your peace no longer depends on being understood by those who benefit from misunderstanding you. Your integrity does not require approval. There comes a stage in inner growth when you realize that integrity is not a performance. It is not something you display to be clapped for, nor is it something that must be defended in front of an audience. Integrity stands on its own, quiet and unshaken, even when no one agrees with you. The need for approval fades the moment you understand that your values do not become weaker simply because others refuse to acknowledge them. Many people confuse integrity with reputation. Reputation lives in other people's mouths. Integrity lives in your conscience. When you constantly explain yourself, you are often trying to protect reputation rather than preserve truth. You worry about how you are perceived, how your actions might be judged, how your silence might be misinterpreted. But integrity does not negotiate with perception. It answers only to alignment between what you believe and how you act. Seeking approval can subtly erode self-respect. Each explanation given to satisfy doubt teaches you to place other people's opinions above your own judgment. Over time, this creates inner conflict. You begin to second-guess decisions that once felt clear. You adjust your values to fit comfort zones that were never meant for you. Integrity, however, demands consistency, not consensus. There will always be people who question your motives, no matter how pure they are. Some project their own intentions onto you. Others feel threatened by your clarity. Explaining yourself to them does not bring peace. It brings delay. Delay in growth. Delay in self-trust. Delay in living fully aligned with who you are becoming. True integrity does not argue its case. It moves forward quietly, allowing time to reveal truth. When your actions consistently reflect your values, explanations become unnecessary. People may disagree with you, but they will sense your steadiness. And those who continue to doubt were never looking for understanding in the first place. There is a powerful shift that happens when you stop asking, "Do they approve?" and start asking, "Am I aligned?" Alignment brings calm. Approval brings anxiety. One strengthens your core, the other keeps you dependent on external validation. Integrity chooses alignment every time. It is also important to accept that integrity can be lonely. Standing firm in your values may distance you from those who benefit from your self-doubt, but solitude with self-respect is far more peaceful than connection built on compromise. You are not meant to be understood by everyone. You are meant to be true to yourself. People who demand explanations often do so to maintain control. If they can make you justify your boundaries, they can slowly dismantle them. Integrity recognizes this and refuses to bargain. A boundary does not require a speech. A value does not require debate. A decision does not require consensus. When you stop explaining yourself, you send a clear message to yourself most of all. You affirm that your judgment matters. You affirm that your inner compass is trustworthy. You stop leaking energy into endless clarification and redirect it into purposeful action. Integrity also teaches patience. You no longer rush to correct every misunderstanding or defend every accusation. You allow time to do its work. Truth has a way of surfacing without force, and when it does, it stands stronger because it was not dragged into argument. In a world that constantly demands justification, choosing integrity over approval is an act of quiet courage. It is the decision to live from the inside out rather than the outside in. When you embrace this, you no longer fear being misunderstood. You understand yourself, and that becomes enough. So stand firm. Let your actions speak. Let your consistency answer questions you no longer need to address. Your integrity does not require permission to exist. It does not need applause to remain true. It simply asks that you honor it, even when no one else does. Emotional distance is a form of self-respect. Many people over-explain themselves because they feel emotionally exposed. They believe that if they clarify enough, soften enough, or justify enough, they will be accepted. But emotional overexposure often invites misunderstanding, not connection. Some individuals listen not to empathize, but to gather information they can later use to question, judge, or undermine you. Distance becomes necessary when openness is repeatedly met with distortion. Self-respect begins when you recognize that not every relationship is safe for emotional honesty. There are people who thrive on emotional reactions. They provoke, challenge, and confuse, not to resolve issues, but to maintain influence. When you remain emotionally available to such people, you give them power over your peace. Distance removes that power without confrontation. Emotional distance does not mean you lack compassion. It means you have learned discernment. Compassion without boundaries turns into self-neglect. You can wish people well without allowing them into spaces where they cause harm. You can remain kind while remaining firm. This balance is not weakness, it is emotional maturity. When you stop explaining your feelings to those who dismiss or invalidate them, something shifts inside you. You stop asking for permission to feel the way you feel. You stop trying to be understood by those unwilling to listen. Instead, you begin to trust your inner experience. That trust strengthens your emotional foundation. Distance also brings clarity. When you step back emotionally, you see patterns more clearly. You recognize manipulation masked as concern. You notice repeated cycles of confusion and blame. This clarity allows you to make conscious choices instead of reactive ones. You respond with intention rather than impulse. There is peace in not reacting. Emotional distance gives you space to breathe, think, and choose. You no longer feel compelled to defend your emotions or justify your boundaries. Silence becomes easier. Calm becomes natural. You begin to realize that your worth is not dependent on emotional engagement with everyone who seeks it. Some people interpret emotional distance as rejection because they benefited from your openness. When that access is removed, they feel unsettled. But discomfort is not always injustice. Sometimes it is simply the result of a boundary being placed where there was once unlimited access. That boundary protects your energy and preserves your sense of self. Emotional distance also teaches others how to treat you. When you stop over-explaining and oversharing, you communicate that your inner world is valuable. You set a standard for interaction. Those who respect you will adjust. Those who do not will reveal themselves without effort on your part. It is important to understand that emotional distance is not permanent isolation. It is selective connection. You remain open to those who show respect, consistency, and sincerity. You close off from those who bring confusion, instability, or control. This selectivity allows deeper, healthier relationships to form. In choosing emotional distance, you choose peace over performance. You stop performing emotional labor for those who misuse it. You stop shrinking your feelings to maintain comfort in others. You stand quietly, knowing that your emotional world deserves protection. So do not apologize for emotional distance. Do not explain it away. It is not bitterness. It is wisdom earned through experience. Emotional distance is not the absence of feeling. It is the presence of self-respect. And when you honor that, you create a life that feels calm, grounded, and free from unnecessary emotional battles. Walk away before you shrink yourself. There is a quiet danger in staying where you are constantly required to explain, justify, or defend your existence. Over time, it does not just drain your energy, it reshapes you. You begin to soften your voice, shorten your thoughts, and doubt your instincts. Walking away in such moments is not an act of weakness. It is an act of preservation. It is the moment you choose growth over gradual self-erasure. Many people stay in conversations, relationships, or environments far longer than they should because they believe endurance is strength. They tell themselves that patience will eventually be rewarded, that understanding will arrive if they just try a little harder. But there is a point where patience turns into self-abandonment. When you feel yourself shrinking to maintain peace, it is time to leave, not dramatically, but decisively. Shrinking does not happen all at once. It happens in small, unnoticed ways. You stop expressing your full thoughts because they are always questioned. You stop setting boundaries because they are always challenged. You stop trusting your inner voice because it is constantly doubted. Each compromise seems harmless, but together they form a version of you that feels unfamiliar and diminished. Walking away restores proportion. It returns you to yourself. The moment you remove yourself from an environment that demands constant justification, you feel the relief almost immediately. Your thoughts become clearer. Your posture becomes firmer. You remember who you were before you started explaining yourself to those who never intended to respect you. There is a common fear that walking away means losing something important, connection, opportunity, or approval. But what you are truly losing is a version of life built on tension and self-denial. What you gain is space, space to think, space to breathe, space to expand instead of contract. Walking away does not require anger or final speeches. In fact, the most powerful exits are quiet. No accusations, no explanations, just clarity. Silence becomes your final statement, not because you have nothing to say, but because you have said enough to yourself. Some people will misinterpret your departure. They may label you distant, proud, or uncooperative. Let them. Their interpretation does not define your reality. Staying to correct every misunderstanding only pulls you back into the very dynamic you chose to leave. Freedom begins when you no longer need to be understood by those who refuse to see you. Walking away also teaches you self-trust. It reinforces the belief that your discomfort is valid, that your intuition deserves respect. Each time you choose yourself over prolonged discomfort, you strengthen your inner authority. You stop asking others whether your boundaries are reasonable and start honoring them without negotiation. There is also a deeper truth. Not every situation deserves closure. Some environments thrive on unresolved tension because it keeps you engaged. Walking away breaks that cycle. It denies access to your energy. It ends conversations that were never meant to heal. When you choose to walk away before you shrink yourself, you protect your future. You protect the version of you that is confident, expressive, and whole. You ensure that your growth is not limited by spaces that cannot contain it. Life is meant to expand you, not reduce you. Relationships are meant to strengthen you, not make you question your worth. Conversations are meant to connect, not control. When these foundations are missing, leaving becomes an act of self-respect, not abandonment. So remember this. You do not owe anyone your gradual disappearance. You do not owe anyone your silence born of fear. But you do owe yourself honesty. And sometimes honesty sounds like footsteps moving away, not in defeat, but in dignity.